for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Siddharth, or just Sid if that's easier, and I will be your presenter for today's session. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that you have no issues with my audio or with viewing my shared screen. So I hope you can see my presentation. And I hope you have no issues with my audio because we experienced a few difficulties in recent webinars. So I just want to pause for about 30 seconds and just ensure that everything is okay with your setup. In case you have any issues, do reach out to us on the live chat option and we'll try to troubleshoot immediately. So I'm just going to pause for about 30 seconds to a minute and just ensure that everything is okay with the webinar setup. So if it's all good, let us know on the chat. If it's not good either, let us know and we'll try to fix it. Perfect. It looks like we're all set and good to go. Just taking a little bit of an extra precaution because we had a few issues in recent webinars. So I just want to make sure everything is all right. Right. So I just want to get a couple of other housekeeping things out of the way. The first thing is that we will be sending you the recording of this webinar session within a day or two. So you'll get a copy of the video. So don't worry about that. And also, I just wanted to let you know again that we're all available on the live chat, myself as well as our technical support team. So in case you have any questions about the webinar, feel free to ask them at any point and we'll try to answer them immediately. And also towards the end of the webinar, I'll see if I can handpick a few questions and answer them for the benefit of the larger audience as well. Right, so let's get started. And so this is what we have planned for today's session. It's going to be a 35 to 40 minute session, following which we've allocated about 15 minutes for Q&A. So stick around for that as well. So what we're going to be looking at is basically the importance of log data when it comes to IT security and compliance, and exactly how we can leverage this log data using a SIEM solution. Right. So what we're going to be looking at in particular is 5 critical alerts that you need for IT security. Right. We call it the top 5 critical alerts. But as you probably guessed, there's no such thing as a top 5 critical alerts. But rather, what these alerts are is that these are common events that every IT security team would want to track. Right. So what I mean by this is that irrespective of which compliance regulations you need to follow or which industry you're from, there are certain events that are crucial for any security administrator. So we're going to look at 5 such critical events and also discuss how we can go about tracking these 5 events, right? In terms of setting up auditing and alerting for these crucial events. Right, we'll also go over some of the basic SIEM concepts. Some of you might already be familiar with these, but I thought we could use this as an opportunity to clarify some of the basic questions and misconceptions that comes up when we talk about SIEM. And of course, we want to have engagement on the live chat. Some of you have already been talking to us on the live chat. So do drop in messages about your opinions on what's being discussed, as well as with questions that you have about the session. And also, if you just want to say hi, do that as well. So this is what we have planned for today's session. So let's get started without any further ado. Right, so first and foremost, what is SIEM or what is SIEM? Right, because some people say SIEM, some people say SIEM. I personally prefer saying SIEM. It seems more easier that way. But the reason I want to discuss this is most of us sort of know what SIEM entails when it comes to security, but then a lot of the time, because of different vendors using different terminology and jargon, it can get a little tricky to really understand what a SIEM solution can do for your security program, right? Because a lot of the times vendors call these solutions as log management solutions or auditing products. Some of them say SIEM, some of them say threat management, unified threat management, and things like that. So it's very important to understand when you're looking at or evaluating a solution as to what value it can bring to your security program, right? In terms of what are the kinds of security use cases you can achieve by deploying the tool that you're looking at. So for a moment, forget about the jargon and forget about all the textbook definitions and think about what problems you're trying to solve in security and compliance and look at what kinds of use cases a particular product can help you achieve, right? So in short, what a SIEM solution can do is that it can help you continuously monitor security events, right? So this is very critical because you have millions of events happening across your network on a daily basis, and a SIEM solution is essentially going to help you monitor these events continuously, right? And it's going to do that by allowing you to run audit reports so that you can periodically track the occurrence of different events, and also it's going to help you stay alerted for security threats, right? You're going to get the strategy that you want to go with is you want to run audit reports for events that can be reviewed periodically. So if you take something like logon activity, you can probably schedule audit reports for every week. Whereas if you take something more critical, such as an account lockout, and we'll get to that in a bit, you want to set up an alert for that, right? You want to periodically review events with reports, events that aren't an immediate concern and that can be checked on every week or every month. You want to do reports for that, and you want to set up alerts for events of interest, events that you need to look into immediately, right? So a SIEM solution essentially by doing this is going to help you investigate security incidents more efficiently and respond to threats quicker. And it's going to be very important when it comes to compliance regulations as well, right? Because most compliance regulations expect you to track logs and retain these logs securely for a certain amount of time, right? Some of you might be complying with SOX or FISMA or PCI DSS, and all of these regulations expect you to actually track and archive the log data and also store them securely for a certain amount of time. Some of them even expect you to store these logs indefinitely, right? So in short, a SIEM solution is going to help you monitor security events continuously and help you achieve the kind of auditing and alerting that you need for a solid compliance program, right? So when you're looking at SIEM solutions, ask your vendors that you're evaluating, ask them specifically what kinds of reports and alerts you can run using their tool, right? Try to understand for your environment what kinds of reporting and alerting requirements are needed and exactly how you can achieve these use cases by deploying a SIEM solution, right? So this is what we want to discuss over the course of the webinar. So this is in short how a SIEM solution is actually going to work, and we're going to be starting the process by defining an audit policy, right? We're going to start off the process by actually implementing an audit policy in our environment. So this essentially means you want to go to your different log sources, whether it's your Windows servers, your domain controllers, your SQL, your IIS, your network perimeter devices, whatever be your log sources that you're looking at in your environment. You want to first go into that console and define what are the events you need to track, right? I'm going to show this to you in the case of your Windows environment. I'm going to show this to you in the next slide, but I want to reiterate the importance of setting up or defining the audit policy, right? Because you want to go to each individual resource or log source that you have and define what are the events that system needs to generate log entries for. So this is very crucial because you want to spend time in actually listing out the events that you want to track so that you don't end up tracking every single event that happens in your environment, because then you're just going to have a lot of noise and it becomes difficult to actually detect important security events, right? So this is the first and foremost, the most important step, which is to actually define an audit policy on each of your systems, right? So this will tell the system for what events it needs to generate logs for. Now, once you do that on each individual system, those logs are probably going to be written on some location on that system. So you want to then centralize all of these event informations into one single console. And that is exactly what your SIEM solution is going to do. Once you define these audit policies on each of these systems, you want to then configure all of these systems with your SIEM solution so that all event information gets centralized into one single location, right? Because this is going to make it easier for you to manage different events happening on different environments, right? So you don't have to, for example, say you're concerned about some activity on your SQL server as well as on your Cisco firewall. You will be able to manage these events from one single console, as opposed to jumping onto your SQL admin console and then jumping onto your Cisco admin console, and instead of having all of these in different locations, you're going to be able to centralize or aggregate all of these pieces of log information from different systems into one single console. Now, the benefit of doing that is that the intelligence of the SIEM solution, it can actually correlate data from these disjointed sources and find out patterns of events that could be a cause of concern. Most SIEM solutions today have this functionality of event correlation, right? So what you can essentially achieve is, not only are you centralizing all of this log information into one location to make it easy to manage, but your SIEM solution, most SIEM solutions are going to be able to correlate these disjointed pieces of data and give you alerts for crucial events, right? So this is a very important aspect, because you're going to be able to track activities, say, on your VPN and on your servers, and correlate these events and find out potential threats that are evolving in your network. So apart from actually getting these alerts, your SIEM solution is also going to help you archive the log data that's been collected from different sources. And this is an important aspect of most compliance regulations, right? So you're going to be able to securely archive these logs, and this is going to help you report events for compliance. And also, in case something goes wrong, you're going to be able to investigate, conduct a forensic investigation, and file an incident report, learning exactly what happened during a particular security incident. Now, the reason why I went over these steps is because you want to ask your vendor that you're evaluating, the SIEM vendor that you're evaluating, you want to ask them at each of these points, what are the functionalities that they bring to the table, right? At each point, in terms of log collection, right? The first step of collecting logs, you want to find out how your SIEM vendor is actually going to help you collect these logs from different sources. Like, is it going to be real-time collection? Is it going to be agentless or agent-based? Do they provide the flexibility in log collection? Are they going to discover your different assets in your network and easily help you configure logging on these sources? So you want to check at each of these points of log collection and correlation and alerting and archival. You want to check exactly how your SIEM vendor is going to do it, because different vendors do it differently. So you want to figure out exactly what they do and whether that is the best fit for your organization, right? So for example, if you take alerting, and that is what we're going to be discussing in the rest of the webinar, you want to check with your SIEM vendor exactly how you need to configure these alerts on the tool, and look at exactly what kinds of alerts you can get for your environment, right? So because you might be, say, for example, focused just on your file clusters and shares, then you want to ensure that the SIEM solution that you're looking at can give you alerts for things like permission changes and um, permissions modified on a confidential share and a confidential data accessed and modified and things like that, right? So you want to figure out exactly what your requirements are in terms of what kinds of reports and alerts you need for your security and compliance program, and figure out exactly how your SIM solution can help you at each of the stages of this flow diagram that you see on the chart, which some people call the log management lifecycle. And you want to figure out exactly how the SIM solution that you're evaluating can help you at each of these stages. And in case you're already using a SIM solution, see how you can leverage the tool better at each of these different stages. Right. So coming to the actual practical steps that you need to take, we looked at some theoretical aspects, but here's exactly what you need to do in order to achieve SIM, right? So you want to first list out all the events that need to be audited, and then go to those systems and configure logging only for the events that you want to track, and then centralize the log data and analyze using a SIM tool. Now, I'm just going to jump into my group policy editor on my Windows machine and show you exactly what it means to configure an audit policy. Some of you might have, of course, dealt with this in the past, especially if you're involved with regular compliance audits and that sort of thing. But in case this is new for you, I'm going to show it to you anyway on my system. So I'm just going to jump to the local policy editor. And what you can do is, if you go to the audit policy settings, you will notice that there are a whole bunch of security policies defined, and there is a security setting configured for each of these events. Now, what this means is that if you take, say, policy changes and it says no auditing, which is by default, what you can actually do is you can go ahead and configure auditing for the success and failure of occurrences of this event. So if you do that, your system is then going to be tracking successful and failed policy change events. Now, this is very important to understand that these policies are not enabled by default, right? Especially I'm looking at a Windows environment, and over here, these policies are not enabled by default. So it is up to the security administrator to actually go and define this audit policy and apply it across on a GPO, right? So you want to decide. So if you take, for example, account logon events, and this is something that most of you might want to track. So you want to then go ahead and configure auditing for the success and failure of logon events. Once you do this, what happens is that the system starts generating logs when successful and failed logon events occur, and these get written to the event viewer in the case of Windows. And if any of you have used Event Viewer, you will know exactly how painful it is to actually leverage the audit trail and get granular reports and alerts, right? So I'm not going to get into the limitations of Event Viewer, but what I wanted to talk about is in setting up the audit policy, you want to try to be as granular as you can and very specifically choose the events for which you want log entries to be generated for. So for that, what you do on Windows is you have what you see on the left pane. It says Advanced Audit Policy Configuration. And what you can do with this is you can granularly set auditing for each of those 9 categories that we saw earlier. So if you take account logons, for example, you have specific subcategories that you can choose to audit, right? Because if you just go and configure auditing a logon activity, every single logon event is going to be tracked by the system. But instead, if you go to the advanced audit policy configuration, and if you take something like, say, object access, you can see 13 different subcategories and enable auditing only for the ones that are of concern for your security and compliance program. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this for a bit was to stress upon the importance of actually figuring out your audit policy plan in your environment and going to and actually listing out specific events that you want to track depending on the sources that you have in your network. So if you have like your SQL servers and you have your firewalls, routers, switches, you might have specific endpoint security solutions and things like that. You want to go and figure out exactly what events you want to track. You want to make a list of these events and then enable auditing only for those events, right? Because if you do this optimally, then your systems are going to be tracking only the events that are of actual concern, and it becomes way easier for you to then set up alerting and generate reports and all of those things. So this is step number one in what you need to do to actually generate an audit policy, define an audit policy, and go and configure this on your systems. So moving on to the next slide, and before we actually see the 5 critical alerts that you want to set up, I also just want to take this opportunity to talk about Manage Engine's SIEM solution. Some of you might already be using this or might be in process of evaluating the tool. And what we've got is a product called Log360, right? Which is a comprehensive SIEM solution that integrates 2 of our auditing products. So one is called EventLog Analyzer and the other is ADAudit Plus. Now, EventLog Analyzer does log management across your network, everything right from your network devices to your SQL, your IaaS, to your workstations and everything. And ADAudit Plus, as the name suggests, focuses on real-time AD auditing, right? So your important events happening in your Active Directory is going to be tracked in real time by ADAudit Plus. Now, both of these tools together help you get a complete overview of events happening in your network and put you in a position to tackle both internal as well as external threats. I'm not going to go into the details of the tool because I don't want to make this a sales pitch, but I thought I'd introduce you to the tool because I'm going to jump into the tool to show you exactly how you can configure and achieve reporting and alerting using the product. Right. So in case you have more questions about the product itself in terms of what it can do feel free to ask those on the live chat, and our product consultants will help you understand those features better. Right, so now moving on to the main part of the webinar, which is to actually look at 5 critical events that you want alerts for, right? So these are 5 critical events that you want to track in your environment no matter what, and also see if you can set up reporting and alerting for these events. So I'm going to start off with number 1, modifications made to confidential data, right? Extremely important in today's security and compliance space because most compliance regulations, including the GDPR, which is, by the way, coming into effect tomorrow, the GDPR expects you to track accesses and modifications made to confidential data, right? So this is what IT security regulations have become all about today, protecting confidential data. So it is no surprise then that from a SIEM point of view, you want to ensure that you're tracking activity on your files and folders and databases, right? You want to ensure that every access and modification made to sensitive data is being tracked in your environment. You need to be in a position to really answer the 4 vital W's, the who, which, when, and what, right? So if you take a piece of sensitive data on your file or folder, you need to be in a position to know who is making the change, which object or which piece of data is being changed, when are these changes being made, and what the changed value is versus the old value. Right? So this is a very basic concept when it comes to auditing, but it's really important to stay on top of these 4 vital W's, right? Because your auditors will want to know who's accessing your confidential data, who is modifying confidential data. They might want to know who are the people who have accessed the file server that stores confidential data over the last 5 or 6 months. So you need to be in a position to clearly tell them that, hey, these are the people who are doing these actions on my sensitive data. This is hugely important, and I'm just going to show you a screenshot of um, Log 360 in terms of this is a report that shows the different file and folder changes that have happened over the last 24 hours on a particular file server, right? This is just simulated data, but what I want to talk about is the different kinds of events that are being tracked. So you can see file folder deletions, renames, file folders being moved, modified, files and folders being created. So all of these things are being tracked by Log360 so that at a given point, you can see on the table below, you're going to get crucial data about activity on that file server, right? So if you take a particular file server, you can get important information about the time that it was a particular location was accessed, and who accessed who accessed that particular file or folder, and exactly what change or modification that they actually made. So this is very important. And you can also see on the left hand side, it's very important to have this sort of granular data so that it's easy for you to pull out the information that you're looking for, right? So you can look specifically into things like fail attempts to read files or delete files or write files. You can look at changes based on particular users. So a particular user, especially if they have privileged access, you can easily track what are the exact changes and modifications and changes that they are performing on your files and folders. So this is going to be a very important um, dashboard to have when it comes to any data security regulation, right? Because you want to be in a position to know all of these things that you see on the left hand side in terms of the files being created, deleted, modified based on the servers, based on the users, permissions being changed. Now, again, that's going to be a very crucial aspect of regulations like the GDPR, because these regulations want you to have a defined security policy in terms of who is accessing what data, and in terms of um, is your confidential data actually secure, right? So and so obviously in terms of who's accessing and who's modifying data, this is something that you want to be tracking continuously. So this is my number one alert that you need to have. You want to have tracking set up for accesses and modifications made to sensitive data on your files and folders. And this includes permission changes, right? So if you have your access control lists and someone's making changes to that, you want to ensure that you're getting alerts for those events as well. Number one alert, number one issue in IT security, data security, and you want to ensure that you have reporting and alerting set up for accesses, modifications, permission changes made to sensitive data on your files, folders, and databases. Extremely crucial, extremely important. And really, I don't need to keep stressing on this because I'm sure all of you agree. So ensure that you have these sort of this sort of reporting and alerting set up for your file and folder changes. Right. So this brings me to number two, and this is where I'm going to also jump into the product and show you how to set up alerts using Log360. And the second alert is server shutdowns and restarts, right? So especially unexpected or repeated server shutdowns, because this could be associated with breach activity, right? So this sometimes server shutdowns could happen due to some bug, and it requires some troubleshooting. But from a security aspect, a server shutdown can be an indicator of compromise on a particular server, right? So you want to ensure that anytime if a critical server is shut down or restarted, you get a real-time notification for that. So here's where I'm going to jump into EventLog Analyzer, the EventLog Analyzer component of Log360, and jump to the alerting console. I'm going to have to log in again because my session expired. So I'm just going to jump into the alerting console of the product and show you how easy you can set up these alerts using the tool, right? And the same idea extends for any other alert as well. So if I just go to the add new alert profile page, here I can define the specific alert and decide on which systems I want this alert to be triggered for. So I'm going to first choose a name for the alert, and I'm just going to call it critical server shutdown. And I'm going to choose a severity for the alert. So this is obviously a highly critical alert. So I'm going to call it, I'm just going to say high. And now I need to choose the devices for which I want this alert triggered for. So I have discovered 12 Windows machines in this domain, and I want this alert for if any of these machines are shut down. Right, so I'm just going to add these devices. So I want my alert to be triggered on this Windows group that has been discovered. And the next step is actually choosing the alert that you want. Now here is where a powerful tool like Log360 gives you pre-built reporting and alerting so that it's very easy for you to actually set up an alert that you're looking for. So we have over 1,000 predefined reports and alerting criteria built into the tool. So what this means is that you don't have to go and set up alerting in a convoluted way, but instead for most common security events of interest, you have it pre-built into the product. So I'm just going to go to scroll down all the way to W because I want an alert for the Windows server being shut down. And my apologies for the slow network, but so I'm just going to choose the event that I want the alert for here, which is a Windows shutdown. And you can see that when I choose the event, a rule criteria gets populated right here. So it says event ID equals 513 or 4609 and source equals Microsoft Windows Security Auditing, and you have a seemingly complicated rule that is automatically triggered by the product. So this is where the intelligence of our product development team comes into the picture in terms of identifying important events that you want to track and building that functionality into the tool out of the box, right? So what this means is that as soon as you get the product, you can go ahead and immediately pick and choose the alerts that you want in your environment and simply click save, and then the product starts tracking the occurrence of Windows shutdowns in your environment, right? So now you just have to then choose the mode of notification. You can get an email alert or an SMS alert, or you can also run a program upon the alert being triggered so that you can proactively mitigate the threat. So the reason why I wanted to show this to you is to really talk about how easy it is to set up these alerts on Log360. All you got to do is choose the device for which you want the alert for and choose the alert that you want to be triggered. And once you do that, Log360 is anytime any of these Windows servers get shut down, Log360 is going to give you a real-time notification depending on the mode of notification that you've selected. Now, this is how easy it is to actually set up these alerts. And if you actually go to, you can see while selecting the alert, you can also customize alerts, right? You can also choose exactly, you can define a customized alerting criteria and the product will start tracking that as well. The product also gives you compliance alerts. So if you take a particular regulation like say Sarbanes-Oxley, the product is actually going to give a whole suite of alerts for complying with Sarbanes-Oxley, right? And you also, but my favorite part about the product is actually the predefined alerts, because it becomes so easy for a security administrator to pick and choose the events that they want to track in their environment and very easily configure alerting for these events, right? So you can just see so many crucial events. You have accesses denied to users, AD backup, auditing events dropped, a whole bunch of things, blue screen errors. All of these things are given out of the box. And this is just for Windows. So you can actually go ahead and choose other log sources as well. So if you take, say, your Fortinet devices, again, you have a whole bunch of pre-built alerting criteria that is given to you out of the box. Different things: critical attacks, critical events, debug events, uh, data DLP, fail logons, fail VPN logons. It's really interesting to go through all of these alerts that are available out of the box and pick and choose the ones that are important for your security and compliance program. And the best part about the reporting and alerting functionality of the tool is that you not only is it so easy for you to configure alerts, but when it comes to actually reports, you don't even have to configure anything. In the sense that all the reports that are available on the product get automatically generated once you configure a log source, right? So once you configure your one of your devices, um, if you look at say, just a moment. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I've just I don't have populated data for some of these things, but uh, yeah. So if you take a particular event, like you want to look at specific categories of events, you all of these things get automatically populated in the product, which means you don't actually have to go and configure these reports. Once you define an audit policy on a system and configure that system with the product, all of the reports available for that particular system but get automatically generated by the product. So you only have to go and configure the alerts that you want. And again, that is really easy in terms of you just go and pick and choose the events that you want, and you'll start getting those alerts as well. So why this is useful is that you can start seeing results from day one of the deployment, right? So as soon as you deploy the product and discover the log sources in your environment and add them for monitoring, the product starts generating reports instantly. And once you configure the alerts, you can start tracking those as well from day one of your deployment. Right, so coming back to the presentation itself, and I just wanted to show you the product so that it becomes, you get more clarity in terms of how you can set up reports and alerts using the tool. And I encourage you to interact with us on the live chat and tell us specific alerts that you want in your environment, and I can actually go ahead and show you how easily I can configure these using the product. Right? So if you take a specific event, say you're concerned about a security group membership change in Active Directory, say if one of your users is added to the domain admin group, and you want an alert for that, you can tell us on the live chat and I can show you exactly how I can configure that alert using the product, because most likely that particular alert would be pre-built into the tool and you just have to pick and choose that event. It's going to be that easy. Right, so this is alert number 2. Moving on to alert number 3, and here we talk about logon failures and account lockouts. Now, this is again extremely crucial for most compliance regulations, because most regulations expect you to track login activity, especially on your critical servers. So you want to be in a position to detect multiple logon failures, because this could be associated to an attack like brute force or other password attacks. And you want to also ensure that you're getting real-time notifications when accounts are getting locked out, right? So this is going to be very crucial. And I'm again going to jump into EventLog Analyzer to show you how correlation can help you detect logon related attacks, right? So let me just jump to, in fact, I have some data populated about a suspicious service getting installed on a server. Let me just change the date range, just a moment. So what I wanted to actually show you is the product is actually able to detect a complex chain of events that you see right here and give you an alert for when all of these events put together happen in your environment. So you can see between 1748 and 1751, a whole bunch of events have happened, and the product is actually able to correlate these different events and give you an alert for a potential indicator of compromise. So you have an account fails to log on a few times, you have it happening a few times, and then an account successfully logs on, and which is why you have the element of the brute force attack, and then a service is installed on Windows, and then a service is started. So this is a critical chain of events, which could mean that someone is compromising one of your Windows servers. So the reason I wanted to relate that to alert number 3 was because a lot of attacks involve, at some stage, involve logon failures and account lockouts happening, right? Because and in some stage, the attacker is going to try to log on to one of your systems. So you want to ensure that at every point, log on activity is being continuously tracked, right? So that you're in a position to schedule reports to actually review this login activity on a weekly or daily basis. And you want to also ensure that in case you have potential attack activity like the one I showed you use it on the correlation engine, you want to ensure that you get real-time notifications for when these events happen. Events like account lockout. So if a server account gets locked out, you want to ensure that you're getting a real-time notification, because this could be that could indicate a security risk, right? So this is event number 3. Make sure you're tracking logon failures and account lockouts. Next up, alert number 4, security group membership changes. And I mentioned a word about this because your security groups in your Active Directory or really any environment, even your Azure or AWS, your security groups are going to be really crucial in terms of providing the right levels of accesses to different users, right? So when it comes to that, you want to ensure that if group memberships change, if users get put into groups with privileged access or with elevated privileges, you want to ensure that you get real-time notifications for that. So if you think of your Active Directory, you've got a lot of high-level groups like your enterprise admins, your domain admins, your schema admins, some custom admin groups that you might have created by yourself. And you want to ensure that if by chance, whether due to an attack or whether due to a naive administrator, if by chance a regular end user is added to one of these privileged groups, you want to ensure that you get a real-time notification, right? Because you don't want to, because a lot of attack activity involves an escalation of privileges, because an attacker is going to try to move around your network using admin credentials, because that is useful for them in terms of messing around with your network. So you would usually see a lot of attacks happening wherein an attacker breaches an account and then looks to elevate privileges for that account so that they can then easily go and tamper with your critical settings. Because if they get admin rights on Active Directory, they are just simply going to be able to go to your group GPOs, right click, hit delete, and it's okay, thanks, bye, right? Because all your admin groups have very important privileges in terms of crucial crucial tasks that they can perform on Active Directory or the rest of your IT infrastructure, and you want to ensure that you know exactly who is being moved to these privileged groups. So you want real-time alerting for critical changes such as security group membership changes. Very important. This is a very, very important security use case, and you can actually achieve this real-time alerting using the ADAudit Plus module. You can actually get real-time alerts when users get moved to groups with higher privileges. This brings me to the 5th and final alert, and I thought I wanted to talk about your network devices, the aspect of your firewalls as well. And you want to ensure that just as changes in general are very critical and you want to track changes, you want to ensure that you're tracking firewall rules and policy changes, right? Because your firewall policies are strictly defined to ensure that only the right people are allowed access to critical resources in your network. So you want to ensure that if someone is adding or deleting or modifying existing firewall rules, you want to ensure that you are getting, you're not only tracking this with reports, but you're also getting real-time notifications, right? So if someone goes and makes a change on your FortiGate firewall, you want to ensure that you get a real-time alert notification when the rule change happens. Because think about a situation where someone tries to mess around with their firewall settings to give access to someone who's not supposed to have access, of course, and someone modifies a firewall rule to give another person access to one of your critical servers. So this is a very crucial event to track to ensure that, again, only the right people are accessing critical resources in your network. So firewall activity is something that you want to track. And specifically, I wanted to highlight rule changes because this sometimes gets overlooked because a lot of people might be tracking the actual traffic passing through the firewall, but sometimes they forget tracking firewall configuration changes. So make sure you're tracking these as well. Make sure you get real-time alerts if someone modifies your firewall policies. Again, as you probably guessed, this is something you can do out of the box using Log 360. So this brings me to the almost to the end of the presentation, just rushing through the last couple of slides because we wanted to keep some time aside for Q&A. And I just wanted to sum up by talking about what are the typical log sources that you want to configure with your SIEM solution, right? So you have your workstations, your end user workstations. Sometimes people ignore tracking end user workstations, but I strongly recommend auditing your end user workstations because a lot of the times attacks start right there because it's difficult for an attacker to directly compromise your critical servers and domain controllers, but it's much easier for them to breach one of your end users workstations, right? In terms of having a phishing attack or something like that, it becomes a lot easier for them to first compromise an end user's workstation before moving across the rest of your network. So make sure you're auditing your workstations. Your servers and domain controllers are, of course, very critical. Your network perimeter devices, that is your firewalls, routers, and switches, make sure you're tracking those syslogs. Your IDS and IPS, very important for detecting and responding to security threats. You want to track endpoint security solutions that you might have installed. Your databases and web servers, very crucial. Threat data, if you're using any threat intelligence platform, you want to ensure that you're able to correlate that threat data with the traffic that's passing through your network. And of course, your public cloud infrastructure. So a lot of you might be having hybrid environments or moving or having a cloud first strategy, in which case you want to ensure that you're tracking logs from your public cloud infrastructure as well, right? In terms of your Azure or AWS platforms, you want to ensure that you're auditing logs generated by CloudTrail or your Azure log services as well. So these are typically the log sources that I've dealt with in my experience, and these are the kinds of log sources from which you might well want to collect event information from. And as you probably guessed, Log 360 gives you pre-built auditing functionality for all of these log sources. So if you're looking at evaluating Log 360, you will actually be able to configure all of these log sources and more into the product so that you're able to leverage pre-built reporting and alerting. And that's going to be a very important aspect of meeting your security and compliance objectives. Right, so this brings me to my final slide. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today. Sorry to rush through the last few slides because I wanted to keep some time aside for the Q&A. So in case you're curious about how you can set up particular alerts on Log 360, feel free to shoot them out on the live chat and we'll help you with that. If you have any other questions about the product's functionalities or any other alerts that you want to set up in your environment and you're curious to know how to go about it, let us know on the live chat and we'll keep answering them as well. And also do take a moment at the end of the webinar to fill up the feedback form. Just spend 10 to 20 seconds to let us know what you liked or didn't like about the session and also what suggestions you have for future webinars. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. Keep interacting with us on the live chat. And I hope you have a great afternoon and evening ahead. Thank you so much. Oh, and I just wanted to point out just one more thing, one more little thing, especially since we are doing this webinar for the European region. I just wanted to point you out to a free resource that you might find helpful, especially with the GDPR coming into picture. Um, you can actually access this by going to Log360's website. I'm just going to navigate, in fact, to the website itself. And I wanted to just point you out to a free resource that we have for you that might be useful in terms of complying with the GDPR. So let me just, yeah, we've got a small mini sites of sorts, and if I just send you this link on the live chat, let me just type out the link. Yeah, I'm just sending out a free resource. You probably have got the link now on the live chat, and you can access this free resource to get an ebook on the Securities Admin Survival Guide for the GDPR, right? In terms of what are the different steps you want to take to ensure GDPR compliance from a security administrator's point of view, specifically dealing with the articles that talk about security of processing of data and mandatory breach notification and things like that. So this might be useful, especially if you're from the EU and you want to you're looking at creating a GDPR compliance program in your organization. This is going to be pretty useful in terms of building a program in your organization for the GDPR, right? So just wanted to point that out. Also on Log360's website, we've got a lot of other resources if you're looking to explore the product. I can also point you to one more resource, which is especially useful when it comes to evaluating the product. And this is sort of a mini site where you can schedule a free personalized web-based demo of the product, and you can sort of pick and choose your requirements in terms of what industry and compliance that you're looking to achieve, and also what are the sources that you want to audit in your environment. So you have your Unix servers, Windows servers, files and folders and everything. So you can sort of pick and choose what functionality you're looking for, and our product consultants will give you a free 15-minute or 20-minute personalized web-based demo of the product at your convenience. So I'm just going to share you this link as well. Um, so be sure to check out this resource if you're looking to evaluate the product. So keep the questions coming as well. I'm trying to answer them as our technical support team. And once again, thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, and have a great day ahead.